to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
G'day everyone, welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. I'm flying solo today. It's just Phil Tarrant. I don't have one of our regular co-hosts here. One of the reasons why is because we're going to do something that we said we start doing on a quarterly basis, and that is pretty much to review our property portfolio. So the portfolio that Smart Property Investment has. For those who have tuned into the stuff that we've done on this in the past, one of the reasons why we launched Smart Property Investment was to not only give all you guys really good insights and intelligence on how to be more effective at buying a property, but we also wanted to show the real world how to get it done, no bullshit approach to investing in property. So we decided to launch our own portfolio, which we did about 5 years ago. And the idea was to take you guys on a journey and show you everything that we do in creating wealth through property. I like to say that we've been pretty good. The purpose of the exercise was to show where we went wrong and the mistakes we've made and the challenges we've faced. And we've been very fair and honest and transparent and open with some of the things that we could have done better. But by and large, I'm pretty happy the way this portfolio has grown over time. So we're 5 years in now. We haven't been doing much for a little while, for about a year or so since we've bought something, and we're just gearing up to buy again. So last time we caught up with Steve Waters, who's our buyer's agent from the Right Property Group. I think it was episode number 26 when we did a review of our portfolio and looked at where we were and what our plans were moving forward. We've moved on. Things have happened. We've got some progress moving ahead. So I've asked Steve back in the studio to have a chat with us and just really get a take on how we're tracking, why we're going a particular way, and to run through some of the numbers that we've been getting back from our valuations from our lenders. Steve, how you going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Good, thanks. I know Steve really well. It started off as a professional relationship, and now it still exists to be a professional relationship. I turn to Steve for helping us out in growing our portfolio, and importantly, Steve sort of plays a secondary role, and that is sort of mentorship as well. So Steve's on the ground, he's in the trenches every single day, and I turn to him as the editor of Smart Property Investment just to get his feeling on the marketplace and where things are heading. I sort of throw things to him and look for his insights and guidance, and I use those to not only help set the editorial direction of the publication, but also help us influence the way in which we think about our property portfolio and grow our property portfolio. So thanks. I do appreciate, Steve, all the work that you do with us in helping us do this. Let's look at some of the numbers, mate. So we've just gone through a round of refinancing. So last time we spoke about a portfolio 3 or so months ago, we just started that refinancing phase. So it took us a little while to get our financials in order. And I was going through all the information that I had to send to our mortgage broker in order for us to start the refinancing process. And there was about 10 or 11 separate pieces of sort of financial information, whether they're tax returns or financials from different trusts, my personal sort of PAYG stuff, everyone involved in the process. And it's a headache to stick all that together. Hence the reason why it's taken me a little while.
It always does though, right?
It always does. And you're the same, you probably have a more, I'm not going to say complicated, but probably a more sophisticated investment vehicle that you use to invest in property, and therefore it's a headache for you as well to get this stuff together.
Yeah, and the problem with investing in property is it's not so much finding the property or buying the property, it's the finance around it that keeps it exciting, and that's probably the biggest challenge. And if you are self-employed, it's always going to be harder.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. So my recommendation for our listeners is keep your house in order, keep your financials up to date. And ours weren't not up to date. They're very fluid, and we always know where we are. But just packaging all that information together is a headache. So if you can keep on top of it over time, it's going to be a lot easier. We spoke about it before. We've missed out on buying opportunities because we weren't finance ready, and you're a massive proponent of having a pre-approval, aren't you?
You have to be in today's market purely because the market is so buoyant that good opportunities come and go very, very quickly, and it's not the market that you can negotiate terms or conditions in a contract. That's more for a slower market. So being finance prepared is always going to sit you in the box seat.
It is. And the good thing with us is that we present really good financials to our lenders. And I get asked all the time, how as a self-employed guy, I don't really have a lot of trouble securing finance. I guess the simple answer to that is that I run a profitable business and I pay myself a salary, and it's easy to explain to a bank my serviceability capabilities. It might be a little bit more complicated than most because I need to show how I pool income and I can show a holistic view of, to give a bank the confidence to lend me money. And borrowing money is not a problem for us. It's a lot of the problem is getting our stuff sorted out.
So getting the stuff together, right? Yeah,
it is good. So our overall portfolio position today, so I've plugged in some new numbers. So our mortgage broker, Ross, who's an Aussie broker, He just sent me through these numbers in terms of we're looking to refinance 5 properties in our portfolio. But before we actually refinance, but considering the valuations, I've plugged them all into a spreadsheet that I keep. And our total valuation now of our portfolio, and valuation is the right word, isn't it? Valuation,
Yeah,
the value
market
of our
value,
portfolio,
yep.
is 5.26 million. So of that amount, the total equity that we have in our portfolio is shy of $2 million. So that's pretty good, right?
You couldn't have tweaked a valuation to
I know,
get you
it's
there,
perfect.
right?
There's 1,994,771 and 02 cents. And that's interesting. You say tweak a valuation to go there. We know what the debt is.
Yeah.
Easy. I look at my bank statements and I know how much money we owe the 6 different lenders that we use. So that's an easy number to work out. In terms of the valuation, the value of the properties, it's a little bit more elastic, I guess you could say, because we've got actual bank valuations here. And this is what the banks tell us of the properties that we're looking to finance, what their value is. And therefore, that's the benchmark for what we can extract in terms of equity. And I'm looking at some of these numbers here, and some of these valuations were better than I had in my spreadsheet originally. So what I thought the valuations would be. And a lot of the times you can work out what the val is in a sort of plus or minus maybe a couple of percent, looking at market comparables, recent sales and all that sort of stuff. So when I plugged all this information in, it spat out the valuation of 1.994, whatever it was, right, which was good. But let's look at some of these vals, Steve. So just before I start there, so based on 5.2 million in value, total debt is 3.265. So that's 1,994 in total equity. If I refinance that at 90%, it means I can pull out 1.468. If I refinance that at 80%, so if I wanted to pull all the cash out today and start buying properties without having to incur any LMI expenses, I could rip out $942,000, which is a lot of money. You do a lot of damage with that.
Well,
right?
whichever way you look at it, it's a pretty awesome result over 5 years.
It's really good. Yeah. It's really good. So the total LVR, as it sits right now, without any refinancing, is 62%. That's a pretty conservative LVR in your experience?
I think what's really important to know is that there's 2 types of valuations. There's your finance valuation, which is carried out by the lender via a valuer, and then there's market valuation, and often the two can be madly
skewed.
Different.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen in these vals that we've got back from the broker.
Yeah.
I'll run through. So I think we made it pretty clear, and we write about them in the in smartpropertyinvestment.com.au all the time. Go and check it out. But the properties in our portfolio. So we've got a place in Mount Druitt. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. It's on Carlisle Street. Anyone who is a property investor's probably been out west at some point. Yeah. The valuation coming at 330 on that, which was pretty much what we thought it would be. So fair. Yep. You reckon that's is that representative of the market, Steve?
I think it's a good market valuation. I think the valuer, in my opinion, this time's got it right. So he's valued at 330, and I think that's what you'd fetch for it if you were to sell it today. Okay, that's cool.
Then we got another place. It's not far from there, really. It's in North St Mary's. Valuation. That's a 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, sort of fibro.
Yeah,
it's not
clad
most
house.
Glamorous place, clad house. It's on a corner, so it gives us upsides. We've spoken about potentially putting a granny flat on that, or knocking it down and sticking a duplex on it. So there's plenty of upsides in the future. But this was the second property that we bought. And it's been a good little performer in the portfolio. We've refinanced it once before after we did a renovation. But today, the bank's come back at a valuation of 430. Now, we thought we should be getting about a val around 460 or so, didn't we?
Yeah, and what's interesting to know about this whole Western corridor, I suppose, is that the market has peaked there, and it probably did, say, 6 months ago or thereabouts, maybe even a little bit longer than that. So what you may see going forward is just a slight reduction in terms of the valuations, which has certainly been the case here. From a valuer's point of view, having said that, I think they might be a little bit wrong, not taking into account the upside, the corner block, the potential development, but they can't do that anyway. They've got to do it as is, where is. Just the same, I think they've got it wrong. At the very worst case scenario, it should have been what it was prior to this, because it's actually come back, 30,000? Yeah, 30,000 based on last valuation.
Yeah.
6 months ago.
And this goes to getting a valuation. You never know. It's if the valuer is there on a Friday and he wants to get down to the pub and quickly meet up with his mates and he's not really into it.
Yeah, possibly.
It's but you know what I mean. Like you never know. On a different day with a different valuer, it could be plus or minus 10%, right?
And all the time. And we've had cases where we'll get valuer A from bank A go out on a Monday, and then valuer B from bank B on a Tuesday, and we've had it up to 20% difference within the space of 20. Well, one of your properties was the same years ago, Burke, up at Central Coast.
Yeah. So you never know. And we'll quickly finish these numbers up on these vals, but let's have a chat about presenting your property for valuation and how you can help influence a more positive valuation. So the next one is in Ambervale. So Ambervale's a suburb of Campbelltown.
Yeah, Campbelltown Shire,
Yeah, 5 Ks from the CBD in Campbelltown. good little performer. The Val's coming in there at 490, which was up a little bit on what our expectations were.
Yep.
Which was good. So all those last three properties in Mount Druitt, St Mary's and Ambervale is all financed with the one lender. The next property is Cambridge Park. So they're coming at 625, which is up on what we expected.
Yeah, remarkably
50 grand or something, right?
Yeah.
Which is good, and let's chat about it in a sec. And then the other property we have is in Berkeley Vale. Now, Berkeley Vale is it's a suburb in the Central Coast. I guess you say it's closest to, what is it, about 15 k's from Gosford or so?
Wyong. Central Coast is probably the best way.
Central Coast, yeah. So people that live in Berkeley Vale might have a job in Gosford, or they might have a job around there. So that's done well. It's about 470, and that's pretty consistent with what we thought the valuation would be on it. But looking at those 5 properties, and let's talk about growth in property. So why do you invest in property, Steve? You invest in property because you want the thing to go up in value. Yes or no?
Well, yes is the bottom line.
That's
right?
why you do it, right? Yeah. And you want to hold that property for as long as you can, getting someone else to pay your mortgage.
With the best cash flow that you could get.
Absolutely. So investing in property is simple. It's not a complicated concept, is it?
Not by any means, but I think people do overcomplicate it, which is a whole other conversation, right?
It is, yeah. We'll leave that for today. But I was up the coast surfing on the weekend, and I went to a Chinese restaurant for dinner on Friday night. And I'll just give me a second, I'll explain this to you. It made me think about it because the bloke, there was no one in the restaurant. It was like a Friday night or something or other. And the bloke who was serving us sort of just chatting and stuff. And we just started talking about property for some reason. And he said, I'm gonna buy property. I'm gonna buy some investment. That's good. It's cool. And he goes, I'm gonna buy in Badgerys Creek. And I went, okay, why? And he said, it's because the airport's going in there. And I went, okay. And I said to him, why do you think property goes up in value? And he couldn't explain to me why. And I said, mate, that's the first thing you need to understand before you even think about investing in property, because the premise of property investing is you want the thing to go up in value. You need to work out what makes things go up in value.
Did you give him a magazine?
No, I didn't. I told him to listen to the podcast. So. But he was like, it was like a light bulb moment for the guy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah, really. I went, don't worry about any other stuff. Just educate yourself, work out why property goes up in value, because you invest in property for it to go up in value. Now, looking at these 5 properties, they've all gone up in value.
Massively.
There's a concept, a term, or you probably hear it banded around all the time. Property goes up in value every 8 to 10 years, is it pretty much right? Doubles in value every 8 to 10 years. And that's, if you look historically over time, you probably see those patterns in different cycles.
And I think it's probably a scenario or a formula that gets banded around and too much. I certainly don't subscribe to it that property doubles every 7 or 10 years. Some will double in 12 months, which I've had, and some will still haven't doubled after 15 years. But I think since Captain Cook got here, property's done fairly well, as long as it's been located in good metropolitan areas.
Well,
right?
he knew what made property go up in value, right?
Well, that's why he came here.
Good water source. Anyway. Okay, so has probably gone up every 8 to 10 years in our portfolio. Well, we've only been at this for 5 years, but I think this is a pretty good case for showing that property does rise. So
absolutely.
We look at Malley Street. So it's a property that we've got out in North St Mary's. We bought that property at 215, and today valuation is 430. So that's doubled in value in 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, what I haven't taken into that increase, so the purchase price, that's what we paid for it, right?
So just gross numbers.
Yeah, it's gross numbers. But remember, we had to, there's all the stamp duty, legals, et cetera, which is typically about 16% of the purchase price. 5%.
Yeah.
Plus your legals, plus everything's about 5%.
About 5% is generally the rule of thumb of the purchase price, which covers everything except your renovation costs.
Costs. And we dropped, it's probably where I got the number from, and we dropped 17 grand. So that thing's up. But on the gross value, 215, today, 430, 100% increase. Good. The property we have at Carlisle Street, which is, we mentioned beforehand, in Mount Druitt, we bought that at 190. Today it's worth 330. So that's bank valuation.
Yeah.
So, in anyone's language, that's the value. That's gone up 74% in 5 years. The property we have in Ambervale, we purchased that at 252. Today worth 490, or the valuation 490. That's gone up 94%. The property we have in Cambridge Park, we bought that 236 now, 236,000. Now there's a story behind that, and you can go and check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, and you'll see some of the trials and tribulations we had in buying that property. But bought for 236, today worth 625. It's gone up 164% in 4 years. Pretty good.
Awesome.
And the other property that we just got to refinance on, Berkeley Vale, up on the Central Coast. Bought that for $230. Today we're $470. So that's gone up 104%. Happy days.
And I think what people need to understand when listening to these figures is that it's obviously about buying in the right area, but it's buying at the right time as well. So if we go back to 5 or so years ago, well, it was an emerging market. So the trick was to identify the area and then just load up as quick as you can and as much as your finances and your risk appetite would let you. But market timing also had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And of those 4 or 5 properties that we just outlined, so as I said, they were the gross numbers of the purchase price. So the property in North St Mary's, we've spent $17,000 on a reno. We haven't spent a cent on the one in Mount Druitt. That's as is when we bought it.
Yep.
I think we replaced the alfoil curtains with some actual real curtains. I think it's probably the small investment we made. The property in Ambervale, we dropped $10,000 on a reno, which was a real transforming thing for it. Just floors, paint, some
just
new
cosmetics.
blinds, some there's a hole in the wall and whatnot. The property in Cambridge Park, so that's the one that we've had a uptick of 164% increase in value. We dropped just shy of $50,000 on a valuation on that.
Yeah.
That was a full val, and we'll come back to that. And the one up in Berkeley Vale, we dropped $40,000 on a reno.
Similar numbers,
that completely transformed it. So when you look at it's a really good, interesting thing. So the properties that we've had the most growth is where we've spent considerable money on a renovation. So we've manufactured equity in some way, I guess you could say.
So you've made the money on the way in as well as the growth. And typically those 2 properties being Berkeley Vale and Cambridge Park were, to put it lightly, probably the most cosmetically challenged properties at the time, which as a result certainly just steered the buyers away.
They did, and particularly the one up in Berkeley Vale, when we bought that, it was a 2-bedroom house with 1.5 bathrooms. So if you can picture it, it was like a 2-story type number where they've built a house on like stilts and then filled in the bottom of it.
Bricked in piers,
Bricked in piers at the bottom. So what we did, so the top of the house was 2 bedrooms. And what had happened over time at some point was that they'd knocked a wall out to extend the dining lounge room. So we just reinstated that wall, turned into a 3-bedder upstairs, and then we turned downstairs into a nice sort of studio apartment. And it's got one person renting it. I think, he's got like a
large family,
teenage kid or something other than the bottom. I don't know. But that was really good. So we transformed that property, turned it from a 2-bedroom into essentially a 3-bedder plus studio apartment. Hence the reason why we've probably got good valuation on it. And Barry Street was completely different kettle of fish. That place was uninhabitable when we bought it. The bank deemed it uninhabitable. Probably could have lived there at a stretch, but you probably wouldn't want to live there. And we had some financing challenges associated with that, but we dropped 49 odd grand on that and completely transform that property.
Well, it was essentially two accommodations, but it was just rented out as one. So a little bit like Berkeley Vale. It
was good. And the timing of that was really good. So we sort of got into Cambridge Park before it got a massive uptick in growth.
Media attention.
And media attention.
Yeah.
And we also manufactured equity. So we found probably one of the worst properties on the street and turned it into a middle of the range property on the street, but something which has been very popular from a rental perspective, and it's been has had a really good sort of vacancy rates on it, hasn't it?
Well, it's always been rented, and I think we've really got to throw into the pot here just that whole affordability corridor. Even though money's cheap by anyone's means in today's standards, the price of property has gone up considerably, and these are the last of the corridors of affordability, and so they're always going to be in high demand once people realise, I suppose, that they exist. Plus the media attention that was all over the Western corridor.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think what people really need to understand is that there is going to be a period of very minimal growth in the years to come in that corridor, because it's done very, very well, very, very quickly. But once again, it didn't do much for a long time before that either. So people that have property out there, I'd certainly suggest that you don't leverage too much, too high, and keep it at a very reasonable loan-to-value ratio position, because you're going to get that period of
So if you can hold
growth.
it, So let's look at that. So there's 5 properties here that we've got a valuation on, and we're refinancing. The purpose of that refinancing is to give us a cash injection to go out there and buy some more properties. Where and how, still to be determined. And that's something that we need to have a chat about and work out what the strategy is. And, and that's going to involve a whole bunch of things like portfolio diversification, looking for some good yielding properties to offset some of those properties that don't yield as well as they could. Our risk appetite, macroeconomic forces, what's happening with the world, interest rates and all that sort of stuff. And next time we catch up, we'll go through the process of identifying where we've bought. But as we said beforehand, the first step is for us to get the pre-approvals. Now, based on those 5 properties and the valuation versus its debt, we're going to refinance all of those at 80% LVR, which means we can pull out about $470,000, right?
Which is not a bad result considering the initial capital up front to start the portfolio.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Happy days.
I know, right?
And this goes to show that the effect of time in the market, but also the fundamentals of actually buying the right property at the right time in the right place. And that's what it all comes down to. Don't get caught up with hotspots. Don't get caught up in the madness of the next big get-rich-quick scheme. What we've done here is very, very simple. We've just located properties that needed a bit of love in some cases, and we were able to manufacture
Which was the strategy.
Which is the strategy. But fundamentally, it's the fact that we've bought in areas that, irrespective of how bad the property might be, are going to show growth potential in the future. Now, you look at Cambridge Park. So Cambridge Park is it's probably about 5 k's from the Penrith CBD, thereabouts. Now, the local government is investing heavily in that area. It's part of the big growth corridor for Sydney. So you've got both state and local investment into the Penrith area. There's still a fair bit of land out that way that as Sydney increases... No, not anymore. As Sydney increases the population, it's going to grow. It's got good transport links. It's got good amenities. There's good hospital out there. There's very good schools or diversity of schools. There's universities. There's industry. There's pretty much its own little micro city. So people live out there and they stay
all the
in
fundamentals
there.
you're looking for.
Everything's there.
And if you go back in time to when you purchased that, the yield, generally speaking, or the cash flow as a representation of the purchase price, excluding this property because it was uninhabitable, was probably about 7% off memory at the time, which is a very respectable yield, so close to a major CBD like Sydney. What people need to understand is often these affordable corridors actually have the best infrastructure. There's a bus stop every 200 metres, there's a railway station, there's shopping centres everywhere to take care of that disposable income. There's the hospitals, the unis, the jobs growth, the hubs. But the population growth is very, very important as an investor, and as we all know, and it's usually these affordable corridors is where the population growth is at its strongest via immigration and what have you.
Yeah, the thing is also is that, Cambridge Park, Penrith, a lot of people commute in the city. They've got white-collar jobs and they come to town and they do what they do. Alternatively, people just stay in the local area. But what we're seeing out there as well, which is an indicator that you should be hunting for when you look at one of the reasons why property goes up in value and it's creating demand, etc. You want to see wages increasing in the area that you're investing, and that's absolutely fundamental. So where we're at, we've got 470 grand that we can pull out, and we'll go on a buying spree and beef up the portfolio.
The whole strategy now will have to be adjusted based on the numbers after you take out that money, because obviously the debt's going to increase, and therefore the cash flow loss will be a little bit more.
And we may need to offset that and therefore look for some
different types of properties.
But we're not going to go out and drop 500k in 1 month up until the point we use the money to buy a property. We'll obviously have it sitting in offset accounts.
So you're not paying
do you want to explain an offset account and how that works?
Well, I think the easiest way to explain it is that you're going to make the available equity within the property liquid, and the facility that you're going to have against that property to get that equity out, you're not going to be paying for it until you use it. So if you take 10,000 out, you'll start paying interest on 10,000. If you take the whole lot out, you'll be paying for the whole lot. But what'll be a really interesting set of numbers to crunch is that if you did fix the interest rates when you took the money out, as an example, to see what the actual cash flow difference is at those fixed lower rates at a full drawdown as opposed to what you're paying today.
Interesting. But then you need to model on when you're actually going to spend the money and what the gap's going to be. It's a good exercise. So offset accounts, even if you just got cash sitting around that you're not using in property, you've just got a cash reserve, keep it in an offset account.
As long as you're disciplined.
Yeah.
That's the key there.
You don't want to be drawing down on it and spending it all the time.
Absolutely.
So we'll catch up again in sort of 3 months' time and run you through how we've gone about allocating this equity and what we've bought from it. And like always, mate, these things go really fast and we're running out of time. But by and large, you're comfortable with that valuation of those properties? What could have we done better, do you think?
Look, I think the trick to valuations, no matter what the market, is to actually give a valuation or an amount guide to the broker or to the valuer. But we're a big fan of actually meeting the valuer on site, preparing our own reports for the valuer, showing comparable sales, other recent valuations. Also really getting in touch with your property manager, giving them the heads up that a valuer will be walking through the property, and so that the property manager gives the tenants the heads up as well and makes sure that the place is clean. So everything off the floor, everything out of the sink, lawns mowed.
Does it matter?
Yeah, absolutely, it matters.
Why does it matter?
Look, at the end of the day, the valuer is going in there to assess risk. And if you've got a house where I don't know, the tenant might be paying every week, never misses a beat in terms of their payments, but the house is perhaps a little dirty, grotty. The valuer will be assigning a risk factor to that, because if the tenant is looking after the asset in that fashion, there's a probability that perhaps they won't pay, that the owner, the landlord, then can't fulfill his or meet his commitments, and it's a spiralling effect. So you need to understand that the valuer is looking at it in its worst possible scenario from a risk profile, which is what the bank needs to do. So having all these little things taken care of by your property manager, such as cleanliness and tidiness and so on, is very, very important, but also to create the report. Now, into Sydney's market today, where it's very buoyant, well, it's probably not as important as it was, say, when we did Cambridge Park and was getting the valuation then, or Berkeley Vale, or any of the others back then. And if you transpired that into another market of today, such as the Brisbane market, which is emerging in certain areas, I mean, some areas are going to have a massive oversupply, no doubt. Other areas are still emerging. And so you need to meet the valuer on site with your own report to give him the most recent data, because a lot of the data that they're looking at is actually 3 months old. And if you can supply ground truth, and the ground truth is recent sales that you know of that haven't hit land's title yet, so networking with the real estate agents, recent valuations from other lenders if you're part of a group of buyers, and I don't mean pooling your money, but just no other buyers that have had recent valuations or what have you, is going to give you a much better chance of a result that you're looking for. Now, coming back to Sydney though, even though these valuations are for the most pretty much on the dollars, there's certainly going to be some times where in a buoyant market where valuers are perhaps a little easy and they may overvalue something. As a owner, you need to know that that property is overvalued and that you don't take exploit that valuation, I suppose. Use the valuation, but perhaps dial back your LVR on the loan, so that you're never getting yourself in a position where the debt is actually in excess of what the property's really worth.
So your confidence factor of us pulling money out of these properties at 80% LVR, let's say that these parts of Australia, these parts of Western Sydney have plateaued and they're not going to see any growth for any time sort of moving ahead. We're going to have 20% sort of skin in the game on these properties and 80% the bank has, right? So the likelihood of us falling into negative equity, and negative equity is where you owe more money on the mortgage than what the house is worth, is pretty slim chance.
At an 80% loan-to-value ratio position, I think you're very, very safe, even if the market does plateau, even if it recedes fractionally. It really comes down to how much money you want to extract from this in terms of recycling.
And what I want to do with it.
And what you want to do with it. I mean, you might even go 70% and just because for the sleep at night factor and leave the other 10%, or sorry, go 80%, but leave another 10% of that as a buffer.
Yeah. And the thing is also is that these aren't multi-million-dollar properties, right?
Well, they're not, no.
These are $300,000, $400,000. Now, if the valuation of those drop by 10%, so say something happens in the market and 10% comes off all properties, worst case, if I've got a property worth 625 today and it drops 10%, that's $62,000 I've lost, right? But if I'm refinancing at 80, means I've still got that buffer and a factor in there. So if the world fell in and properties in Western Sydney plummeted 10%, it'd hurt, but I'd still be able to probably match. I'll probably still be able to meet my mortgage requirements because a lot of other investors would probably have to get out of Dodge pretty quickly. I'm still sure people need to live in these properties.
There's the key. The types of properties also produce good cash flow, so you wouldn't realise that loss unless you sold the property or if you were called in and to reduce your LVR position by the banks. But this is why we go with this strategy, is that cash flow is king. And that doesn't mean that you need to be in a one-trick pony town to get the cash flow. As long as the cash flow can support the debt in its worst possible time, then it goes a long way to ticking all the boxes.
And that's something you should be putting front and centre of your strategy when you're investing in property.
Absolutely.
Worst case.
Yep, worst case scenario. And if I had a fear with the general population now who invests in property is that everybody's basing their figures on today and how good it is today. Money is cheap. It's the cheapest we've ever had it. It's not always going to be that. So for us, we're looking at a property, how it's going to perform in the worst possible market that it could be, and does it tick the boxes then? Anything above that's a bonus. And the other side of it is, and coming back to your portfolio, is to have that buffer there as part of risk mitigation, and that's to have it liquid. So have a portion of if you don't have the cash in the bank or an offset, then have some of the equity liquid. Even if it was 10%, it'll hold you over for many, many years.
Can do. That's good. So I guess in a roundabout way, last time we spoke about a portfolio, which was about 3 months ago, I said we would have done something by the time we next met, right?
That's it.
I've got some valuations.
It's a good start. That's the easy part, right?
I think this goes back to the spirit and what I sort of introduced this podcast in, is that This is about us doing this, us investing in property, smart property investment, investing in property. So our audience and our listeners and our readers can learn about what we're doing. And we get a lot of really good feedback, Steve. You know, I'm trying to demystify property investing. And I cop a bit of flack around that from the people with really complicated strategies because they want you to think that it's a very difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing to get right. There's a lot of moving parts in property investment, but fundamentally, it's a very, very simple thing.
I think it is, yeah.
Buy a property that's going to help you with wealth creation, so it's going up in value, and just keep that front and center of everything you do. Being hard on myself and our portfolio, 3 months I should have been able to get stuff sorted out. And you know what? It's the complexity of arranging our financials and giving all the information to our mortgage broker is, it takes time, and I don't always prioritize it. So I'm happy for things to be a bit slower in my life as a property investor because, as I've shown by running through some of these numbers, the things are going up in value and they're not costing me a lot to hold, and therefore I'm making money out of it.
And it's not a race. It's not
a race.
Yeah,
it takes time.
Exactly.
So, I'm not looking to get rich quick overnight. I'm looking to create a nice, comfortable, steady future for myself. So I'm happy with where we are, but let's start buying some properties, mate.
Well, let's get you financed.
Yeah, I know. It's good. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. You can follow me at Philip Tarrant on Twitter if you like. The site's just being relaunched, so there's a big emphasis on our property portfolio. So some of the numbers that we've run through today, you can go there and check it all out and have a look what's going on. If you've got any questions, email me, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. We'll answer them live on the podcast if you like. Ask me anything. If there's something that you're unsure of, or you didn't particularly understand exactly what I was getting at, just let me know, and I'm happy to give you some more details. Steve, you'll come back again in 3 months. 3 months' time, though?
Absolutely.
All right. You're going to give me a phone call in between asking me what's happening?
Probably about a dozen.
Yeah. One of the most difficult customers in the world I am, but, it's just the way it is.
It is.
Thanks for tuning, everyone. Appreciate all the feedback that we're getting. Keep those reviews on iTunes coming on the podcast. I really appreciate them. Remember to check us out, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you next week.